Here we are. I am incredibly joyous and grateful to have the opportunity to be here in this space with Lorraine Goldbloom and with numerous of her friends that are here in this space with us. We're actually continuing what Lorraine refers to as the issue series. And without any further ado, so to speak, I thought what I would do, Lorraine, is just turn this over to you, just for anyone who is listening to this recording that is not familiar with the issue series, just a little bit about what you would share about what inspired you to do this.
Sure. It's good to see you, Jeff. And you're looking good, by the way. This is the first time I've seen the fresh,
I'm still kind of test driving it. I'm not sure yet. I don't know if I'm going to buy it or not.
I like it. I think you look fantastic. It's good to see you. It's good to see you all. Yeah. And I've, invited some of my most favorite people to participate in this podcast because I know that doing this work with people really brings together community. And it's interesting how this series has developed. It was originally called the Issue Series, but we've actually been reworking it, and we're now calling it the Finding Presence Series. And I'll tell you why. The story with how it's sort of transformed over time. We called it the Issue Series because we meet and work with issues. I teach something called Vortex Healing, which is a healing modality. So it's very natural to talk about issues. That's why people look to healing modalities, because they have an issue, they want something that they want to work with. And instead of just sort of talking about the nature of Vortex Healing and how it worked, as soon as I started talking about the nature of issues and what they really meant to our personal experience, I found people really started tuning in. They started resonating with the work. And interestingly enough, the issues that are kind of designed to keep us in an experience of separation. I mean, issues are very isolating, aren't they? They leave us in a very separate, isolated place in our pain, in our anger, in our loss, in our anxiety. But when we actually meet them, work with them, and come together to transform them, it brings community together. We realize we're not alone in that process. And then the issues become a gateway to, what I would describe as the awakening process. And Vortex Healing is not just a healing modality. It's actually about awakening. And when we transform our issues, they become a path to freedom. And that freedom is really about being present in the moment without the attachment and the pull of the issues that really keep us out of the moment. So as the series has evolved, it's not just about meeting and working with our issues. It's really about finding presence and being in the moment. And so now, we're calling it the Finding Presence series. And over, the years, it's evolved from, just a series of open talks and healings to some articles to, I was on a cable show called Oneness and Wellness where we did, the whole series. And now I'm here with you and very much enjoying how this exploration unfolds. And after we're done recording today, I'm going to stay on with my group here, and I will bring them through a guided meditation exploring, the issue we're working with in more depth, and of course offer a healing, because the best way to understand the nature of Vortex Healing is to have a direct experience. So that's always something I offer when we come together in groups.
That sounds great. And Lorraine, my apologies. I didn't mean to interrupt you earlier. I just all of a sudden I had like that moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot that you had changed the name of this. And so I know it's been a while
but it's very natural to call it the Issue Series because, and that's why the name stuck for so long, because that's what we're doing here. We're exploring the issues and the experience of separation that they create.
Yeah, I love that. And I was going to just as we move forward, I was going to ask you, what issue you were going to share with everyone today about, and some of your reflections, and then if I could also ask you why you chose the particular issue that you did.
Sure. Well, when you're talking about the experience of separation, what better issue to explore than loneliness?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, that
Yeah.
seems to be, you know, a beautiful example of how that shows up. It's actually the perfect example of an issue in terms of it affects us in so many ways, and it creates a very deep identity and an experience of human pain. And, you know, this is an issue I started to explore as its own event and separate healing. It's sort of 2016, 2017. I did I do these free healings on my Facebook page called pop-up healings, where I just sort of offer a free healing. Anyone, you know, can sign up for it. And the topic of loneliness came up, and I was amazed at how quickly that healing filled and how popular it became. And I began to sort of do a little research about loneliness. And I did a survey to my community about what issues that they might like to see in event form and me sort of structure and work with. And loneliness was really towards the top of the list. And this was pre-pandemic. This was pre-pandemic. You know, it was a big thing. And I thought, oh, how interesting living, you know, in New York City, which is where I am, you know, how so many people would still have this experience of loneliness. So I began working with it, you know, back then. And then, you know, guess what happened? You know, we were all forced into, you know, isolation in different ways, and it played out differently for different people. But it is something that really should be met. I think it's something that we all know on some level at some point in our life. And it's important to bring some love and light to the issue. And you know what? The holidays are coming.
Yeah. Oh,
you know, when we're filming this, it's mid-December, and the holidays can be a very difficult time for people. And this issue in particular can be quite challenging. So I thought it would be the perfect time to just, you know, bring a little love to it, sort of get it on the table, and you know, use it as an opportunity to bring community back together.
Yeah, I love that. And in fact, just what's coming up in the moment is, you know, you mentioned with the holidays quickly approaching, just, you know, in the years of working with your years of working with people in terms of your experiences, it would be very interesting to hear, you know, any of the challenges that you've, you know, with people that you've worked with in terms of, you know, what it is about this particular time of year that, you know.
Yeah, no, I think this time of year, expectations are high. Expectations are high when family should be together and it should be happy. We miss those that we have lost. Holiday times are particularly difficult if you've lost someone. The expectations are high. I mean, New Year's Eve is rough. One of the worst. Yeah. I mean, it's a lovely holiday and it's a new beginning and all of that kind of thing. But in terms of where you should go and who should you be with and who are you with at that happy moment, and it should, and it's the shoulds, isn't it? It's all the shoulds, and I should be feeling a certain way, and this, and very often deep inside of ourselves, we're afraid to admit that we actually don't. We don't fit, you know, the Hallmark card. You know, we're not sure that our story has the happy ending. You know, we're still dealing with all our stuff, you know, on this day. And so I think the holidays can absolutely be a very challenging time. So it's a good time to be kind to each other. And to, you know, in terms of loneliness, we're going to talk a lot about it, but it's a good time to check in on people. You know, check in on people, you know, friends, and, you know, just even people you may not know so well, that person down the street. It's a good time to just check in and say, hey, you know, how you doing? Are you okay? Because so many of us struggle, you know, and I think whatever is going on for us, you know, in life, sometimes just gets magnified around the holidays. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you're speaking of in terms of the, the shoulds and how we think we should feel and how we think things should be. It can be very daunting sometimes what our thoughts and beliefs, around this time of year are.
And that's why, a side note, but on New Year's Eve, I don't really do it so much anymore, but I used to do, when you, resolutions.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, this year I'm going to, do this and do this and do this. And I realized once that my resolutions weren't so much about what I believed that I should do. My resolutions were really about what I believed I should be. I'm going to learn this so I can be smarter. I'm going to lose weight so I can look better, and how loaded that is. And I'm sure this isn't true for everyone, but I know my resolutions had a lot of the shoulds in them. And they were kind of coming from a place of lack. And looking at that was it was a hard day, but it's a very useful moment. So a lot of that stuff, comes up around the holidays, the shoulds, the expectations, all of that. And, just the simple, who am I going to spend my time with at this time of year?
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing those things. I feel like that is so incredibly timely right now, where we find ourselves. And then I was just, speaking more general about loneliness. I was going to ask you, just in your years of experience as well, working with people, what you have seen, how loneliness looks for different people, and talking about the different types of loneliness.
I think loneliness can look very different for different people, just in two general categories. There is the loneliness of functional isolation. There is the loneliness, and we've seen this a lot in the pandemic, where you just can't see people. You can't go out, you can't see people, or, so many people are in a situation where they just can't connect. I mean, human contact, humans need contact. That's not an issue. That's just a natural part of being a human being. And if we don't get it for some reason, it's very hard. It's very hard. And so there's a type of loneliness where we just don't get that natural kind of human contact that we need. However, there's another kind of loneliness where we are in contact, we are connected, and there are so many different ways of connecting these days, aren't there? With Zoom and phone and FaceTime and WhatsApp and all of that. And yet, despite all of that, we still feel disconnected. As a matter of fact, you can be in a crowded room at the best holiday party that ever happened and still feel incredibly lonely if it is a deep issue. And it is, and very often, how we feel when we are actually alone comes up. So it can be very hard to be alone, because we don't have other people around for validation or support or distraction. And so sometimes being alone is very scary, is very challenging. And in that discomfort, we crave, connection. And if we don't get it, then we can feel very lost. At the same time, solitude can be incredibly nurturing. And I'm, by nature kind of an introvert. And so I feel very rejuvenated when I have a little time alone. And that's not I say that like it's a completely awake, evolved stance. It's not entirely. Part of it is to be honest, it's kind of a safety issue, because I don't feel like I have to perform or convince anyone that I'm doing well. I just give myself permission to feel how I'm feeling, and that is very helpful. But it can go either way. You can have both going on simultaneously. It's a complicated issue, but in short, loneliness is about feeling that lack of connection, that lack of connection with other people, that lack of connection with life, that lack of connection, with the divine. However it shows up, it gets imposed in many ways. And loneliness is a place where we don't feel seen. And that's why it can happen within a relationship as well. We can be in a relationship and feel like I'm not being seen, I'm not being heard, and therefore feel very lonely. And in my experience, that's probably the worst kind of loneliness, because you imagine a relationship is going to solve everything. And a relationship can't fix that deeper kind of loneliness. It ends up
that reminds me of that saying. I don't know if this applies or not. Wherever we go, that's where we find. Wherever we go, that's where we are. And so I was wondering, just specifically when you speak about in relationship, that we're still bringing our, even though we're in a relationship. Or I love how you talked about, the big party. We're around all these people.
Yeah.
We living in a large metropolitan area, just surrounded by people everywhere, that we still find ourselves dealing with whatever it is that we're dealing with, whether we're in solitude or alone or not.
Yeah, our issues go with us wherever we go. And we kind of expect if we change our circumstances, they'll magically go away. And that doesn't happen as often as we think it does, because then we just get more frustrated. It's like, oh, now I have a partner, or now I'm at that party and I still feel this way. And then a hopelessness can kick in. And that's actually, can lead us more, into the issue of depression, which is its own episode or 2 or 3. But in the context of loneliness, the issues that we have, sometimes when we're alone, they really just come more to the surface, and that can be really, really hard. And anytime we don't feel seen or heard, that's painful to the spirit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then I related to this, I was going to ask you, when we do find ourselves in solitude, are there, and this is just based on your experiences with people that you've worked with, sometimes can that, that loneliness that we're feeling can sometimes drive us into situations where we're coming into a relationship, or we're, meeting a group of friends or making friends, whatever the case may be, participating in activities with groups where we're trying to somehow soothe something. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Of course. Absolutely. Loneliness can drive us to do quite, a desperate action, because we're trying to sort of override that feeling. The last time we got together, we were talking about the issue of intimacy, or issues that prevent us from knowing intimacy. And we talked a lot about vulnerability. And in order to really know intimacy, one has to have the courage to be vulnerable. So when we're talking about loneliness, it's an important thing to remember, when we find ourselves, in that position where we're experiencing that loneliness, which is different from solitude. Solitude, you can be alone, but not feel lonely. But when we're experiencing, loneliness, I think the first thing to do is with any issue, is to recognize it for what it is. Because sometimes we just feel bad, or we start resenting people for not being there or doing, and just to recognize, I'm feeling disconnected. And then from that place, we're more likely to pick up a phone or reach out or say, and realize, oh, well, if I'm not feeling seen or heard, maybe the one I love isn't necessarily feeling seen or heard. Let me reach out. And then that becomes an important step. This is why, especially around the holidays, I say, well, let's check in on each other. Let's, see what that is. And in that process, then I think it becomes a good time to really check ourselves and, am I really willing to be seen? all the things we talked about with intimacy. Am I actually putting mixed signals out into the world where I want to get together or I want company, but I'm not actually willing to be seen and share with you how I'm really doing?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
let me just, good or bad, right? Let me actually have a real conversation and real connection, which is the only thing that really satisfies that. How open are we to genuine engagement? Sometimes we realize we're not as open as we thought we are, and that becomes the root cause of our loneliness. We find ourselves, talking to a lot of people, but connecting with no one, which is very easy to do, especially these days, with social media and the way things happen so fast, and time is so structured, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You go from
Absolutely.
class to, event to home to and I just remember being a kid and I had all this time to, play by the creek, doing nothing except playing with my own imagination. I had time, and it doesn't feel like there's that kind of time for us as adults, or just these days. I don't know, maybe that's just my perception of it, but there seems very little time to just be alone, just to ask, how am I feeling alone?
Yeah.
How is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Just sort of take the time to check in with yourself, and see what's going on there, and then reach out, or enjoy the solitude to explore whatever that is. And then when we do connect, it can be from a more genuine place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, it definitely does. When you're talking about, the proliferation of social media, and there's all these ways to I don't want to say effortlessly, but it's made it so much easier to connect with people. You don't have to walk somewhere or get in the car. I'm not saying that there's not opportunities to do that. There clearly are.
Right.
But I also wonder too, if it's more effortless to be able to communicate with people. I have to wonder if there's something about, the more effort that gets made, if we're not necessarily connecting with someone electronically, there does require some effort
It
to
does.
actually go and meet someone
It
somewhere.
does. It requires more effort. We're not so used to doing that anymore. And I
Um,
think you can genuinely connect through WhatsApp and all of that, but we often don't, because it it has its own kind of buffer, doesn't it?
yeah.
You
Oh,
can
yeah.
easily hide, say, "Oh, hey, great," and then so many of us do that just in casual, conversation. But to really use it as a tool for connection, then it's fantastic. Whatever, there are all sorts of ways to connect to people these days, but I think we have to be more present in the moment and say, this is what I'm trying to do. I don't want to just, check the box of saying, hey, on my list of friends. I want to actually talk to you and see how you're doing and share a moment with you. And it's become so acceptable to sort of check out of the moment,
Yeah.
meaning
Oh,
that
yeah.
it's perfectly acceptable to check your texts when you're, I remember being at a funeral and someone just sort of checking their phone real quick, and that no one blinked. It's becoming, more acceptable to sort of check out in the moment. And so I think we need to be a little more conscious to be present and be with people, and make the effort to see and hear them. And people, presence responds well to presence. People
Oh, yeah.
respond well.
Definitely.
They will see and hear you if they felt seen and heard, and then suddenly that whole dynamic changes, and you're sharing a very intimate moment with someone or a group. I don't know, have you ever been at a party, and then suddenly it's all fun, and then suddenly someone actually reveals something, um from the heart, and the whole dynamic shifts,
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
me too, I've had that, and then suddenly, you're all together, and that's because someone was willing to open their heart, be a little vulnerable, share, or ask the poignant question, saying, hey, I've been thinking about you, and the whole moment shifts, and you can feel it. It's palpable, and suddenly everyone relaxes, and it's magical, to be there. And that it can be with dear friends or just casual acquaintances, but you feel that moment when that dialogue becomes presence.
Yeah, as you were speaking that, I was really, just sensing that on an energetic level that things can change, that, it's and that we can't necessarily explain all that, but somehow the energy.
But we feel it, we know it, we know the difference. And being an introvert, it's not easy to get me to go to a party. First of all, I have to sort of dress up, which is not something I'm in the habit of doing anymore.
That's great.
I'm like, it takes a lot of effort,
Yes.
So once I got to get over myself on that. And then I start, talking to people, and I feel, ask me what I do. Well, I'm healing, but then, most often there's at least one person who on something, there's a genuine connection, in a very enjoyable moment, be it about, what we do for a living or a family situation, and just the willingness to connect, that magic happens. And suddenly you're really seeing people, and they relaxed, and it can be a common interest. It can be anything, but that moment of connection can pull us out of that loneliness, where before we're sort of going through the motions of pleasant conversation, and then, oh, really? Wow, how wonderful. Isn't that magical?
Oh, absolutely. And I was going to also give you some space and time to. I know that you had shared a little bit about, some ways of dealing with loneliness, and I didn't know if there was anything else you might share for people who are finding themselves in that place, and just anything else you might speak to as far as how it can be addressed. And
I think as I said, the important thing is just sort of recognizing it for what it is, and not feel the shame about it. We feel shame about our issues. And to say and to admit, I feel lonely, or to admit you feel lonely within a relationship, is extraordinarily difficult. And we judge it, and our judgments, really keep us out of dealing and meeting and having compassion for ourselves and our issues. So I think that's the first thing, to recognize it, and and honor it. And I think it takes a certain kind of self-love to be willing to do that. And once you've sort of recognized it, and then and meet it with compassion, then you sort of see what it's really about. Am I lonely all the time, or am I lonely here? Or maybe this can be called, I've been sitting back waiting for this person to call me. Maybe I just need to call that person. Maybe there's something going on with them that they haven't called, maybe, who have I really enjoyed that I haven't connected to? How can I engage with life, in a way that I haven't been? And when you ask that question, you can either begin to do it, or recognize why you can't, which can lead you to, wherever else you need to be. Or, no, I'm too insecure to pick up the phone, or I'm too afraid, or wherever it takes you. Asking the question becomes an important part of the healing process, and we hide. I think that's an important thing to notice. In our solitude, in our loneliness, we hide there. So the first thing about recognizing our issues and not feeling shame in them is not hiding from them anymore. Don't hide from the loneliness. Meet it and have compassion for it, and use it as a way of connecting. And that's one thing I really wanted to to do with this Finding Presence series is to change our relationship with our issues, not to just fix them so that we feel better, but actually meet them in compassion and take the stigma out of them. And then they become a gateway to finding presence. They become a gateway to our awakening process, because we don't wake up beyond our human experience. We wake up through it. And really meeting the loneliness is, meeting that experience of being separate in whatever way is a beeline to transformation. It can be very challenging, but it is incredibly profound when we can actually take that breath and explore that fully.
Yeah, I'm so appreciative that you've shared that. And one of the things that you were differentiating between, if I understood correctly, was being alone versus being in solitude. And so I wanted to ask if there's anything you might speak to about the differences and what opportunities are available to when someone is when they open their heart to being in solitude.
Well, as I said, I love solitude. I love being alone. I find it very nourishing to because in that I give myself permission to drop any expectations I have. One of my best New Year's Eves ever was one spent alone, watching the Star Trek marathon, in my small West Village apartment, with my cat, cleaning out closets and stuff like that, because I'm a Virgo and that's what I do for fun. And the reason it was so nourishing, and it's still among one of my favorite New Year's Eves, is that I gave myself permission to just feel how I feel. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to, and that for me was very healing. So, solitude can really be used like that. But then if we are afraid to feel how we're feeling, we quickly get uncomfortable and we feel the need to find something to distract us. If not going out to a party or something, well, then we reach for our gadget or for Netflix, or we all do all sorts of things all the time to distract ourselves from feeling how we're feeling. It's human nature. It's management. It's issue management. So we can sort of take advantage of that moment, that breath, to really see how we're feeling. So if we can sort of just notice that, we can deal with it. Sometimes the scariest thing is that we haven't taken the time. So the feelings, we don't know what it's going to look like. And so we just avoid it. But when we actually stop and say, oh, I'm actually, it's loneliness. I'm feeling lonely. Okay, well, then let's bring some love to that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think that is all the questions that I have that are just coming up intuitively here in the moment. And so what I thought I would do before we turn it over for any questions from the group, I just wanted to give you some space and time. If there's anything that I've forgotten to ask or anything that you feel compelled to share related to this subject, definitely wanted to give you that ability to do so.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I just think it's an issue worth exploring, because I think we all know loneliness on some level. We may not know it every day throughout our lives, but I think we've been in situations because we can be lonely in general. We can be lonely for someone. We can be lonely for something. We can, be lonely if we find ourselves in a different phase of life. It's just something that I think we all know, and therefore I think we should all have compassion for. It can be so difficult to connect. It's amazing that we actually do through all of our issues and all of the pain that we know inform. It's actually extraordinary that we still manage to connect and to know intimacy, but we do. And so to take the moment to just acknowledge that, and I guess again, especially around the holiday season, let's just take care of each other and check in on each other. And just make that, part of what we'd like to do for now.
Yeah, that is, my goodness. That is, yeah, the just sitting with that for a moment and the energy behind that is definitely very healing. Thank you, Lorraine. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. And this has certainly been a lot of food for thought and opportunities for reflection for myself as well. Wanted to just take the time to open it up for any questions. I'll turn it back over to you for that. And yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we have a wonderful group here. You all been listening, and I was just curious your thoughts, if you have any, observations or questions or anything that you'd like to, offer this discussion. We'd love to hear it. Holidays are coming. Andrea, how are you doing?
Hi, Lorraine. I was hearing you and it was amazing. It was amazing. I have enjoyed solitude from a very young age, but I remember one time when I was in my 20s, when it was the opposite, because a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, asked me to stay at her house while she was traveling. And at the very beginning, it was great. I was excited, enjoying, and blah, 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 blah. But then all these emotions and things and issues start bubbling up, and I was so surprised and I was shocked, because I said, what is this coming from? What is it? And actually, I at that time, at that moment, I thought I couldn't survive that. It
Yeah.
was so strong, so strong. So after that, I took the time to meet what was happening to me, and it all came down. And actually, it was a great moment. I am remembering it. It was a great moment of compassion to myself, and a great learning moment for me.
Yeah, no, excellent point, Andrea. Thank you so much, because we're sort of, we talk about loneliness as, oh, it's an issue. Sigh, I'm feeling a little lonely. But no, I mean, connection is a human need, and when we don't get it, when we feel disconnected, it's very deep. It can be very hard to manage. It can be pervasive in our experience of life. So I appreciate your, sharing that story. And it is an act of self-love, isn't it? To
Yes.
take that time and say, okay, I'm going to recognize this and, meet and deal with it. It actually takes, compassion for yourself, which is where it always begins with our issues. If we don't have compassion for ourselves, we don't really have compassion for others. We may act it out, but we don't really. It starts here. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Kathy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well and finding this so very interesting, Lorraine. And I love your comment about reaching out to other people and being aware that other people might be feeling lonely. It's something, loneliness tends to draw me inward. And so I have not in the past been thinking about, maybe I should reach out to somebody and see if I can make them feel a little less lonely. Yeah. And it probably will shift what I'm feeling. Thank you.
Possibly. And that's how loneliness works. I feel lonely. I'm in isolation. Why isn't someone calling me? And, in our own pain, we don't really think about, well, maybe that person isn't calling because they can't, or maybe they have something going on. Or if I want connection, I actually am very capable of reaching out and expressing that. I'd really love to, hey, do you have time to talk? We don't think that way when when we're in the midst of it. And that can change that whole dynamic in an instant when it's done from love.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Anyone else? Denise, how are you doing?
mute button was getting away from me.
It happens. We can hear you now, though.
Okay. Sorry, my voice is a little scratchy. You know, it's funny because I'm actually one of those people that really enjoys solitude. So, you know, loneliness is not something that comes up very often for me, but I have noticed that, you know, there's usually two situations where I do feel something that I would call loneliness. And one of them is, like you mentioned before, this feeling of not being understood, of feeling alienated on a certain level. And I actually find it interesting as I go through my awakening journey, which sounds very dramatic. I don't even like using that lingo. But as I, you know, as I become older and wiser, hopefully, I notice that I'm also, you know, moving away from certain people as I change, and that, you know, and there's sometimes these moments of realizations that you're kind of standing on different planes or on different, you know, it's almost like like the tectonic shift, you know, you're like on one plate, on one earth crust, and they're kind of like moving away on another. And then the other thing too is I feel like actually loneliness, and this is a question for you, Lorraine, too, in some ways also really a disconnection from ourselves. Because I feel like when I do feel lonely, it's because it's in moments of where I'm super busy and overwhelmed, and I've been on my gadgets too much, or I've been talking to too many people, and all of a sudden I've lost that internal connection to myself.
Yes.
So I'm throwing that out there as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what I was sort of talking about. If you have that loneliness here, you're going to have it in conversation with people at the party. You know, it actually comes from, you know, our deepest experience of self. So I think that's well said. And that's where it originates, that deepest sense of disconnection, you know, and it can't be satisfied by just, you know, distracting ourselves with talking with people. You know, it has to be met in compassion and love directly. You know, what is the place in us where we feel disconnected from ourselves, from life, from God? You know, somewhere deep inside of there's a sense of disconnection, and it's bringing compassion and healing to that sort of transforms the whole dynamic. And when we feel disconnected from ourselves, as you say, then we're giving mixed signals to the world. You know, what we were talking about in intimacy, you know, see me here, but don't see this, you know, and that deeper connection is impossible when we're still hiding our own pain. So we absolutely need to meet that, however you phrase it, you know, that deeper sense of connection to yourself or to life or whatever it is. That's where it all begins and ends in the transformative experience. So thank you. Beautiful. Anyone else? Then I'm just going to say, you know, thank you all for, you know, your time and your sharing. We'll stay on after, and I will do the guided meditation and healing for those of you who are willing to share this time. I guess, you know, the one last thing that sort of sticks out in my researching loneliness is I came across an African proverb. I don't remember where I originally found it, and it was just listed as African proverb. But it is, you know, if you want to travel fast, travel alone. If you want to travel farther, travel together.
Wow, yes.
And I just thought that was incredibly profound, you know, and how, you know, our experience of life and what that really means, and the willingness to be open to the experience of sharing our life with others. We have to be open to that. We have to open our hearts for that to happen. It's not just, oh, you know, the world needs to come to me in my place of isolation. We have to be willing to open our heart, which what makes it so hard, but also so fulfilling and transformative when it does happen. That's what makes it so magical.
Yeah, I love that proverb. That to me, that just absolutely, yeah, I don't even know what to say exactly. That's how perfect it is. Yeah, thank you, Lorraine. This has been wonderful. I wanted to thank everyone who's been here today as well. And it's definitely been something that's been a joy to be here in this space with all of you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you.